Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a good few different styles, but I think it is most definitely fair to say that this brewery is best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but also for their kind of modern, juicy, fruity, smoothie, whatever we're going to call them, sour beers. So if those are two beer styles that kind of catch your interest, then this is one of the Swedish breweries that, in my opinion, you really need to check out. So yeah, the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that we have had from them before. It's a style that I know they can do very well, and this is also one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden. So yeah, always nice to review their new beers, and I'm quite curious to see what this one has in store for us today. So hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. And for this review, we are going to return to the wonderful Fermenterarna. So this particular beer is called Bubble Trouble. It comes in at 6.1% ABV, and this is another New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So this beer was released as part of the Lokalt och Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for October of 2022, and I believe this was one of only 2 beers that they released this month. So yeah, we reviewed the last one, the Double Maracas, which was a double IPA, so I thought it'd be nice to have a little look at the single one as well. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what we have. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Fermenterarna before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and you can of course go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on geography. The whole channel has that geography based tagging system. You can check out the playlist of beers from different countries and you will find this one in the Swedish playlist. So yeah, let's crack on then and chat a little bit about Fermenterarna. Onto my brewery notes. So Fermenterarna, or the Fermenters as it would be in English, was founded by Niklas Aronsson and Anna Claesson, who founded the company together back in 2018. So the brewery was originally based in Strömstad in Västergötland, which is very close to the Norwegian border, a very picturesque fishing town from what I understand, but they moved a little bit further south later on. But when it comes to their journey toward being brewers, Niklas had quite an interesting one, because apparently he went into a beer bar one day and ordered a beer without really knowing what it was, and it turned out that this was the Tropic Thunder from Dugisbrygge, which was of course a collaboration with Stillwater Artisanal from the US, for me one of the cult classics of Swedish sour beers. But this just kind of blew his mind, and he was like, you know, this is what beer can actually be. But Anna, on the other hand, had a very long interest in things that ferment. She also ran the restaurant Koster's Trädgårdar, and she's fermented various things in the past, such as, you know, sourdough bread, sauerkraut, you name it, she's played with it and fermented it. But they actually started out with a very small 200-litre brew kit and tanks in late 2018, and they took a break to expand the company, having attended a few different beer festivals, and their beers were received very, very well. But they then went and had a new facility where they had 2 500-litre brew kits and a total tank capacity of 17,000 litres. But they were aiming to brew 50,000 litres over the course of 2019, which they did successfully, but they said at this point that they had the equipment to brew 250,000 litres of beer per year. Over the following years, they continued to develop new recipes and expand the brewery capacity gradually, but in August of 2021, they moved to a new brewery in Hisingen in Gothenburg, and they took their equipment with them and also purchased a new 3,000-litre brew kit. They do plan to open up a tap room at this new site at some stage, and they're also hoping to add a restaurant to that as well, from what I understand. But like I said to you earlier, this brewery is best known for their different New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but also for their modern, juicy, Nordic, smoothie, whatever sour beers. And yeah, in my opinion, these guys are doing some very, very nice beers within these categories. But according to Untappd, they've produced around 150 different kinds of beer as of October 2022. And yeah, hopefully we'll see a few different styles from them at some point in the near future. But yeah, these guys, as I say, very solid brewery when it comes to the New England hazies and the kind of modern fruity sour beers. So yeah, that's everything we really need to say about Fermenterarna for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, once again, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with what's going on, and you can of course check out the Untappd page to learn more about the different beers, or of course you can check out some of my older reviews that I did. I believe I reviewed the first beer that they released through Systembolaget actually back in about 2019 or so. So this is a brewery I have been keeping track of over the last little while. But yeah, let's crack on and have a little look at this beer itself. So this one, as you can see, is showing you a very similar style of artwork that we've had before from Fermenterarna. You can see on the back there is the Fermenterarna symbol. Just bring that up there. You can see Bubble Trouble. So like I said earlier, this one comes in at 6.1% ABV. It's a New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. Gold top on the can as well. It was part of the Lokalt Osmoskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for October of 2022, and I think I paid about 50 Swedish kroner for this one. So that is €5, £4.50 sterling, somewhere in the region of like $5.50, $5.75 American at the current exchange rates. But this beer is hopped with Citra and Mosaic, both in cryo and T90 form. So should be quite an interesting one, quite an old school New England IPA in some ways, I guess. But yeah, let's get this guy open and we'll see what we have. Quite a lot of gas built up in that one actually. You could feel the can was pretty solid. But yeah, 6.1% New England Hazy IPA. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what we have. We'll just pour this a bit carefully because obviously the carbonation is a wee bitty active in this one. But it should still be okay if we just behave ourselves with it. So there we are. That'll do for taking a little look at the beer itself. So as you can see, this beer has poured with about 1.5 fingers, nearly 2 fingers of a frothy, I would say kind of bumpy white head. It is definitely perfect white, so you can see that if I put it up to the camera there. But yeah, kind of bumpy, perfect white head there, kind of medium to big size bubbles in this one. So yeah, not the foamiest of heads that we've seen. But in terms of colour, this one is actually a very kind of bright, hazy yellow. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of the beer as well. But yeah, when it comes to New England IPAs, or any type of IPA for that matter, you don't often have to care about those latter 2 variables. It is more to do with the wort boil and the type of malts that you've used. Quite often the Fermenterarna beers are very kind of bright and yellow like this, but if memory serves me correctly, the Maracas that we had a few videos ago was not quite as bright as this one. So that's an interesting point to make. In terms of the level of haze in this beer, for a 6.1%er, it's not the soupiest and gloopiest of New England IPAs that we've come across. And remember, the level of haze in these beers depends on oak content, wheat content, and the yeast to a degree, but it can vary from brewery to brewery, recipe to recipe, and so on. But yeah, it does look pretty nice, this one. So definitely one of the lesser hazy New England IPAs that I've had from Fermenterarna, of course, but it still does look pretty nice. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation, 1 or 2 big bubbles at the bottom of the glass and just, you know, a few small ones going up toward the bottom of that head there. But you can see the head has calmed down a wee bit, and yeah, it should be all right. So I think that's everything we need to say about the appearance of this beer. Let's take a little closer look at the aroma and see what we have. And I'm curious to see whether this one has the kind of typical sort of farmhousey elements that we expect of Fermenterarna. I'm pretty sure these guys have their own kind of house yeast strains and things that they're using that give you all these kind of farmhousey esters and things. And yeah, straight away I can tell you it does have that. So, as I've said to you in many reviews before, when it comes to New England IPAs, for me there are 6 ways that these beers can lean. They can be sort of farmhousey and yeasty, they can be a little bit more rye leaning and grainy, and these 2 features are a little bit more common in American brewed New England IPAs, but they can also be a little bit more kind of barley malt and bready, wheaty bitey, oaty creamy, or kind of sweet and things. And you will quite often find many of these elements that I've just mentioned in your New England IPA. But when it comes to Fermenterarna, their beers always smell kind of slightly farmhousey and kind of crackery for the most part, and I'm getting that kind of trademark aroma out of this beer right away. So yeah, if I am remembering the beer correctly, I remember thinking with the double maracas, this one's a wee bit different from what they've done before. This one is a little bit more kind of typical Fermenterarna, if you like. But this one, as I say, the aroma is very, very nice. So let's just break it down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So the backbone of the beer for me, it has this lovely kind of Jacob's cream cracker backbone to it. There is a little bit of that fresh white bready bread crust in there. So I do like that. Yeah, fresh white bread crust, Jacob's cream cracker. You've also got a little bit of that more kind of white bready density as well. Yeah, it is quite nice. Yeah, I have to admit, I always like this with the Fermenterarna beers. They always give you this little bit of zippy character when you taste them, but the aromas are usually just very, very soft and very kind of crackery and biscuity. But yeah, Jacob's cream cracker backbone, a little bit of woodiness in there, kind of smooth white bready character on top of that. And yeah, aroma wise, this is just very nice. So yeah, Jacob's cream cracker, kind of more dense white bread, but there's a little bit of bread crust in there, fresh white bread crust, as if it's almost got the flour still on the crust there as well. You get that kind of in between. And on top of that, you get a little bit of a kind of wholemeal brown bready character, but then you can smell the wheat coming out of the beer as well. It could also be the variety of wheat that's very distinctive when it comes to Fermenterarna, because you can smell that more dense white bready wheaty layer coming out of the beer, which I do like actually. I do like that more dense white bready wheat layer that's in there, but again, it's very, very smooth. You also have that little bit of kind of sweetness in this beer as well. So on top of the wheat, you can smell a little bit of the oaty character. And as I've always told you, oats are a good indicator of how fresh your New England IPA is. The more kind of creamy they smell, the more fresh the New England IPA is. But if you get a little bit more dryness and things out of them, then you know that's yeah, that's when the beer's a little bit older. But this beer for me, the wheat smoothens out the beer a lot. You've got the oats on top of it. It's a little bit creamy, a little bit you've got a little bit of a kind of oaty powdery kind of character in there. But yeah, on top of that, there's there's a little bit of kind of Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. There is a little bit of a sweeter side to this beer as well, which I do quite like. So yeah, a little bit of Werther's original butter candy, a little bit of biscuit in there. This beer kind of gives you everything that you would want from a New England IPA on the malty side of things. I do get little hints of a kind of woody character from the malt base as well, and again, this is kind of typical of Fermenterarna. You do get this little bit of woodiness to their beers, but yeah, it does smell quite nice. Green component for me is pretty straight shooting in this one, and again, it's Citron Mosaic. These are hops we're very familiar with. Both 14% alpha acid, both American. Citra's going to give you that kind of big passion fruity mango-y type note. You're also going to get a little bit of lemon lime out of it in a New England IPA, whereas Mosaic is that kind of more oily tangerine character that you get out of it, and you can definitely smell that in this. You can smell those kind of things in this beer. We'll come to that in a minute though. But the green component of the beer, there's a little bit of earthiness in there, which is from the Mosaic. There's a nice bright floral aromaticity as well. You've also got that big zesty kind of grassy character. So yeah, the green component for me is mainly floral and grassy, but it has got a good little bit of zestiness to it. At the same time, it's a little bit more oily. for sure. So yeah, you've got a nice little bit of an oily note to it. But yeah, I think that's mainly to be from the cryo. The cryo gives you that more oily green component to your beers. But you have to remember as well, with New England IPAs, they rely on late addition and dry hopping. You've also got early addition hopping. So early addition hopping, lots of bitterness, first hour of your wort boil. Late addition hopping, last half hour of your wort boil. Little bit of bitterness, mainly flavour and aroma. Dry hopping after your wort boil, and that's all flavour and aroma. New England IPAs rely on the latter two. The West Coast IPAs rely on all three, actually. So this one for me, I think they've done a little bit of early addition hopping in this, because you do get a wee touch of that deep floral aromatic note out of it, but you've also got the big zesty grassy characters as well. But the fruity component of the beer, aroma wise, you've absolutely got a little bit of passion fruit in this one. The big juicy mango from the Citra in there as well. I actually get a little bit of a kind of pineapple-y, apricot-y kind of thing in the middle of the nose, but yeah, big juicy but bright tangerine notes coming out of the beer. So yeah, the way that the flavor, the aroma goes together in this one is very nice. So yeah, aroma wise, this one, it is kind of what you'd expect from a Citra Mosaic New England IPA, and it's got all the kind of slightly farmhousey elements, as I would describe them, from Fermenterarna that we've come to expect over the years. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck in, but I think it is about time that we try this one. So yeah, this is the Bubble Trouble 6.1% New England IPA with Citra and Mosaic T90 and Cryo, apparently, from Fermenterarna in Gothenburg here in Sweden. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah. You know, first impression of this one is just a really nice, smooth, drinkable New England IPA. I like to think that if I was to try this one blind, I'd probably wonder, is that Fermenterarna? It's one of these beers that when you know the brewery, it doesn't surprise you. It meets the standards they've set for themselves, and it gives you everything you would want from one of their IPAs. So yeah, thumbs up to them again. They've produced another solid beer. You know, a lot of people ask me, oh, what is your favourite beer from Fermenterarna or blah, 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 blah. But it's with these guys, you know, when they're doing just, you know, kind of sours and, you know, the modern sours and the New England IPAs, these are the things they stick to. It's very hard to pick a favourite because there's always new ones of the same style every month. But when they can produce solid beers like this and play around with the recipes and stuff, I think it's it's pretty good. This is just another very solid New England IPA from Fermenterarna. For me, I still think one of the double maracas was pretty impressive. I did enjoy that. And there was another one that's gone right over my head, but the original one just with the hop flower on it that I think was just called IPA, I still think that's one of my best experiences with this brewery so far. But you have to remember that the nostalgia factor does play a role in these things. The first really good beer you try from a brewery is one that you're going to remember compared to lots of good beers that you try after that. You know, there is always one that sticks in the mind. But this is another very solid beer for me from Fermenterarna. I think this is good. So, yeah, aroma wise, flavour wise though, this is pretty nice. The first impression of it is it's very smooth. It's got the nice farmhousey kind of notes that you expect Fermenterarna, and it's also got a wee bit of the zippy character, and it's got a bit of green to it as well, which I do very much like. So, as I say, thumbs up to them for this beer. Yeah, I do think this goes together very well. Yeah, so where do we start with this one then? Middle of your palate. Backbone of the beer. You've got a little bit of that kind of fresh brown bready bread crust in there. On top of that, there's a little bit of a Jacob's cream cracker sort of thing coming out of it. And yeah, that's that's the backbone of the beer. For me, that is kind of signature Fermenterarna. The bit of bread crust, the bit of cream cracker. That's what you get out of this beer right away. So yeah, as I say, fresh white bread crust. It's almost as if it has a little bit of the kind of flour still left on the crust. Then you get the more dense. You get you get a little bit of cream cracker first. Toward the front of that middle third of the palate, there's a little touch of a kind of woody. There is a little bit of that kind of woody. Would we say? Um, yeah, there's a little bit of that kind of slightly woody undertone to the beer, which is quite nice. It's almost got a little hint of vanilla to it as well. But yeah, bread crust, a little bit of woodiness in there, the Jacob's cream cracker, and then on top of that you get the white bread. So let's focus on that. There's a kind of crisp, white bready element to this beer that sits on top of that. Above all of that, you get some of the kind of nice wheaty aspects to the beer. So you've got a little bit of that more dense wheaty character in just sitting on top of all of that. And it's interesting because the wheat adds some smoothness to the beer, but it also has a little bit of zip to it as well. And you can feel that the wheat gets a little bit taller on the sides of that middle third of the palate, but the oats go right down the middle. I mean, I get the impression that this beer is a more wheaty and barley malt leaning New England IPA, but with a bit more yeasty character to it as well. This one, I don't think this one has all that much oat in it, and that's what Fermenterarna like to do. They like to play around with the malt base in these New England IPAs and just see what works. To me, I get the impression that this one is not the most oaty of New England IPAs that they've done. This one does show off a little bit more of the barley malt and the yeast for me. I think the wheat is a kind of constant in this beer. The wheat is the kind of anchor that's holding the malt base together. So like I say, above the kind of cream cracker layer and bready layer, you've got the wheat, which kind of comes up a little bit on the sides of your middle third of the palate, but down the middle line of your tongue, if you like, you have that more, you do have that more oaty note out of the beer. So you can feel in the middle of your tongue the oats are a little touch creamy, but as you move out toward the edge of the palate there, they're a little bit drier in a sense. And again, that's an indicator of how old the New England IPA is. So you are getting a little bit of oaty dryness in this one, but in above that oaty layer, you start to get some of the sweetness with the beer. And this beer doesn't have a huge sweet component, but it is there. So in the dead center of your palate, you do get a little bit of that Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing. But as you move further out from that, you start to get a little bit of a more, you do start to get a little bit of that more McVitie's Digestive, biscuity sort of thing. So yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is very, very nice. Yeah, for me, that beer does go together very, very well in that way. So yeah, nice little bit of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. Little bit of a McVitie's Digestive biscuit, and that spreads out toward the edge of the palate there. But for me, as I say, it's actually a very barley malty and yeasty leaning New England IPA, this one. It really is interesting, actually. So let's look at the back third of the palate with this beer. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of a bready build up in there, a little bit of kind of white bready build up, but the base of the back third of the palate, you've got a little bit more kind of white bready character in there as well. You can feel that the bread crust underneath is a little touch more grainy. As I always say, more grainy and bitter flavours come out further back on the palate, the sweeter flavours come out further forward. So a little bit of kind of grainy, a little bit of a more kind of grainy bread crusty note. Above that, as I say, you have the white bready layer, and the white bready layer feels a little bit taller and a little bit more airy. You've also got a little touch of the cream. You've also got a little bit of a more kind of bitiness from the wheat sitting on top of that too. So yeah, the back third of your palate is more to do with the kind of dryness of the bread, and above all of that, you've got some of the yeasty characters coming out of the beer as well. So a few interesting things going on, that's for sure. So Yeah, for me, the the way that that goes together is very, very nice for sure. And it's the yeasty notes on top of the beer for me. It's like a kind of woody, farmhousey type bready thing. There's a little touch of honeycomb to it as well, but definitely on the back third of the palate, as always, you can feel the flavour is a little bit taller. Then as you come into the middle third of the palate, it just kind of condenses down that wee bit and squashes together a bit more. But for me, I think that covers what we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. So let's go on to the hoppy and fruity side of things. Back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it's a little bit more kind of, I would say it's definitely got a little bit more of a herbal character. Then as you push further forward along the sides of the palate, it starts to get more and more floral as you push toward the kind of front corners of the tongue. But round the front curve of the palate, of course, you've got a little bit of a more kind of grassy note to it. But the floral note in this beer, it's not overly deep. It's actually kind of quite bright. But yeah, front curve of the tongue, yeah, you get a little bit of this zesty grassiness out of it. But I think it works very, very well, to be honest with you. I do like how that goes together. So, yeah, fruity side of the beer is is really quite nice in this one. As well. It's kind of what you'd expect. I mean, we know Citron Mosaic very, very well. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate in this beer, that builds up. You've got mainly a white bready kind of note there. You can feel the wheat thickening it out a little bit, but the base of that front third of your palate is, yeah, soft but smooth white bread, a little touch of woodiness to it as well. And on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So the fruity side of this beer, I mean, if you know these hops, as we mentioned earlier, there's no real surprise with this one. At the back of that front third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of passion fruity note. There's a bit of a stronger passion fruit there, but as you move further forward, it gives you a more, it does give you a little bit of a juicy mango, of course. And as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, there's a bit of apricot underneath, but you've also got a bit of a more juicy kind of pineapple on the top. As you push further forward, there's a little bit of as you push into the front half of that front third of your palate, it does lean more towards the kind of tangerine notes you would expect of the mosaic. So yeah, lovely juicy kind of tangerine qualities in there, and yeah, to me that that's all you need to say about the front half of the front third of your palate, the front sixth of your palate, if you will. But yeah, I really like how all of that pieces together in this beer. It is very, very nice. So yeah, flavor wise, this is kind of everything you'd expect. But for me, this is one of the more kind of, I would say, barley malt and yeasty leaning IPAs that I've had from Fermenterarna. But it's really nice. It's very light and it's very easy to drink. And Fermenterarna have always produced very, very good beers in that sense. So yeah, thumbs up to them for this one. I think we can round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So mouthfeel wise for me, this beer, it's kind of it's right in the middle of the spectrum. It's mid-bodied, lighter end of mid-bodied, maybe. I was going to say Campway there, which is Swedish. But yeah, anyway. So bottom end of mid-bodied. Carbonation has a little bit of crispness to it. It's got quite a wet and slightly slick mouthfeel in some ways, but mainly kind of wet. IBU wise, I think this is a fairly standard 30 IBUs. You get a bit more of the floral character out of this beer the further that you go into it. The malt base, as we said, has a bit of, it's got a good little bit of greeniness to it, a little bit of smoothness and things, a wee bit of sweetness. It's got a little bit of everything, but to me, as I say, a more barley malt, wheaty and kind of yeasty leaning IPA. Not so much oaty character in this one compared to what we've had from Fermenterarna in the past. When I think about that, at the same time, we do need to realise this one is lower in alcohol, so it's not going to feel quite as thick as the double maracas that we had a few weeks back. But yeah, the green capote in this one, as I say, nice and floral, nice and grassy, and you've also got some juicy, fruity character to this beer as well. So yeah, I really like how this one goes together. It gets a big thumbs up from me. I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink this beer again. It's nice, and a bit. And as I say, this is the thing. Fermenterarna, whenever they release a new IPA, they always show you a kind of new angle on the New England IPA. So that's something you do have to compliment them on as well. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So this one was the Bubble Trouble, a New England IPA, 6.1% ABV from Fermenterarna in Gothenburg here in Sweden. Very solid brewery, and as I say, one that you need to check out if you like your New England hazies and your juicy fruity sours. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on these beers in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Fermenterarna as well, and we will return to these guys at some point very soon. Slange it, skull, cheers, catch you guys on the next review. Make sure you check out Fermenterarna.